All right, if you're gearing up for the Queensland bar exam, you're going to want to pay close attention. We're talking about subpoena costs under the UCPR. This is a critical and absolutely examinable area. So let's break down exactly what you need to know to master it.
So here's our game plan. We'll kick off with the fundamentals, the why behind all this. Then we're going to tackle the specific rules one by one. We'll hit the big one, Rule 418 for non-parties, then the general rule, Rule 417. After that, we'll cover the practical stuff. Conduct money under Rule 419 and how you actually produce documents with Rules 420 and 420A. Let's jump in.
So let's start with a classic scenario, something you could easily see on the exam. You've issued a subpoena to a witness who isn't a party to the case. And to comply, they rack up a bill for $10,000. So who's on the hook for that? The answer, my friends, is hiding in plain sight in Chapter 11, Part 4 of the Uniform Civil Procedure Rules.
Okay, so first the basics. Why do these rules even exist? Well, at its core, it's pretty simple. When you force someone, anyone, to stop what they're doing, search for documents, copy them, and produce them, that costs time and it costs money. The UCPR needed a clear way to figure out who has to foot that bill.
To really get these rules, you have to understand the problem they were designed to fix. Way back, the federal court in this case, Bank of New South Wales v. Withers, basically said you couldn't get your money back for all the work you did before you physically showed up at court. Think about that. All the searching, the copying, none of it was recoverable. So UCPR Rules 417 and 418 were created specifically to plug that exact hole.
Now let's get into what is arguably the most important rule here, Rule 418. You absolutely, positively have to know this for the exam. This is the special rule that deals with people who are, as the cases sometimes call them, strangers to the litigation. These are the non-parties who get dragged into a fight that isn't theirs.
Rule 418 has 4 key parts that you've just got to remember. First, who does it apply to? A non-party. That's it. Second, what kind of subpoena? Only a subpoena for production of documents. Third, what's the trigger? They have to incur substantial loss or expense. And fourth, the result? Under Rule 418, the court can order the party who issued the subpoena to pay up, and that includes legal costs.
So what does substantial loss or expense actually look like? We are not talking about $5 for photocopying here. This is for real costs. We're talking about the hours your staff spend digging through archives, massive copying jobs, and, this is a big one, the legal fees for getting advice on how to properly and safely respond to that subpoena.
Okay, now here is a massive exam tip. This is a classic trap that catches people out. The case of Harth v. Beale made it super clear that Rule 418 is read very, very strictly. It applies only to a subpoena for production. It does not apply to one of those combined subpoenas, for production and to give evidence. If you mix that up in an exam, you're missing the whole point of this special rule.
So what happens when Rule 418 doesn't apply? Maybe it's a combined subpoena, or maybe you've subpoenaed a party to the case. Well, that's where Rule 417 comes in. If Rule 418 is the sharp surgical scalpel, think of Rule 417 as the broader, catch-all safety net.
Just look at the differences here. Rule 417 applies to any person. And yeah, that includes the actual plaintiff and defendant in the case. It also covers any type of subpoena, not just for production. And notice the threshold is lower. It's just reasonable loss or expense, not the high bar of substantial. Honestly, this slide right here is your key to getting this topic right. You need to burn this comparison into your memory. Rule 418, non-parties, production only, substantial cost. Rule 417, anyone, any subpoena, reasonable cost. Knowing which one to use and when, that's what they're testing you on. It's a core competency.
All right, let's switch gears to something super practical. How do you get your witness to actually show up to court? This is where Rule 419 and the whole concept of conduct money becomes so important.
So what exactly is conduct money? Well, the UCPR Dictionary and Schedule 3 defines it pretty simply. It's just enough cash to cover a reasonable guess of what it'll cost your witness for travel and a place to stay. It's basically an upfront payment, so they're not out of pocket just for doing their duty and coming to court.
And this is the real power of Rule 419. Sub-Rule 2 is crystal clear. If a witness is subpoenaed to get in the box and give evidence, they do not have to comply. They don't even have to show up unless you've given them that conduct money a reasonable time in advance. It's simple. No money, no witness.
Okay, for our final section, let's look at the nitty-gritty. A non-party gets a subpoena for a stack of documents. Do they really have to take a day off work, find parking, and come into the city to hand them over in court? Well, not necessarily, and that's thanks to Rules 420 and 420A.
Rule 420 gives a non-party two very clear, very simple options. Option 1, sure, they can show up in person on the day. Or option 2, and this is the one everyone uses, they can just deliver or post the documents to the court registry. The only catch is they have to arrive at least 2 clear business days before the return date on the subpoena. So much easier. And adding another layer of convenience is Rule 420A. This rule makes it plain that you can just produce copies, paper copies, electronic copies, whatever, unless the subpoena specifically says, no, we need the originals. This saves a massive amount of hassle and risk for the person who has to comply.
Okay, let's put it all together. This is the slide to screenshot for your final revision. Just remember, Rule 418 is your special rule for non-parties with substantial costs from a production subpoena. Rule 417 is your general catch-all rule for any person with reasonable costs. Rule 419 means no conduct money, no witness. And Rule 420 is that handy rule that lets non-parties just send the documents to the registry. Got it? Good. So, I'll leave you with this final thought. Now that you understand the mechanics of Rule 417 and Rule 418, think about how you can use them, not just to get costs back later, but as a strategic shield right now. How can the threat of a massive costs order under Rule 418 be used to push back against an opponent who's just on a fishing expedition? That, right there, is where the theory becomes practice.